What's going on, everybody? Paul from Hashtag Sports. Excuse the deep voice. I apparently am a little under the weather, and not directly a result of the Bills Jets game, but let's talk about that a little bit. I wanted to get on, cut a very quick episode about what really this all unpacks to, what this really means, because I heard a lot of people complaining about a lot of things after the game. Of course, the name factor being that Josh is clearly unhinged. And I think it's funny when we go back to the post game. I think I directly quote Ryan Lasel saying that Josh is unhinged. The truth of the matter is that there's a very large amount of communication that needs to happen between offensive coordinator in the booth, Josh on the field, and then whatever happens on the sideline. And that could take some time to figure out. The downside is that that system should already be established from last year. So I completely understand everybody's concerns about there being, the hell and high water at one Bills drive. I completely understand that. And you would never fire your offensive coordinator after one game. That's certainly not going to happen. But there is a dichotomy change when you start kind of, again, unpacking what ultimately happens when you have an offense coordinator who now doesn't have a head coach there to distract him anymore, because now the head coach is solely focused on the defense. Oh, hey, Justin, what's going on? Josh did not trust Dorsey's play calling at all. D-line played really good. And I think that's one thing that you see in week one, really the first 3 weeks, is that defense kind of runs the NFL. Teams that can get off to a really big start are usually just exploiting a defense that just kind of can't get it together. The offenses aren't clicking because these guys really haven't had a ton of time together in game situations. You look at this receiver core, and the Bills receiver core was a complete makeover from last season. And I think it's fair to say that it's not the look that you thought you were going to get. I think a lot of people thought, like, okay, we're going to see a lot of screens. Well, we actually did see some screens, and that was a newer wrinkle compared to what we saw last year. I think, James Cook looked very capable in that kind of a role. I think James Cook in a role where you're asking him to run from guard to guard, that's a misplaced role. He's not great in pass protection. That's why you saw Damian Harris and a heavy dose of Latavius Murray in a really, really key drive. So I think that showed you some of the trust factors that this offense has at the running back position while they still are sorting that stuff out. But 9 Bills players caught receptions. And that is a bit of a different tone than what we've seen in previous years. And I don't think that should be overlooked. The ball was spread out very evenly. I think there were 3 to 4 Bills receivers who had 4 targets in total. And that's a lot. I think we're kind of accustomed to Diggs getting his 13, Gabe Davis getting 6-ish, right? And then a couple guys getting a couple. I think it's a little quick to say that Dalton Kincaid is not being utilized correctly in this offense. First off, I want to point out, if Dalton Kincaid catches four passes every game for the entire season, he'll have the 3rd best reception total of any rookie tight end in NFL history. So that position takes an immense amount of time to kind of maturate into. There's a lot of feel that goes into that position. And I think the people thinking that Dalton Kincaid is just a really big slot receiver is not a fair representation of what that really is going to be like. And it's oh, hey, Stefan, what's going on, man? I haven't seen you in forever. Greetings from Germany. Well, greetings from the US. I again, the feel of the offense is going to change. You saw Buffalo try and get Josh in a rhythm very early. The scripted plays, I thought, went relatively well. Again, it's first time that the offense is clicking. So I thought that went well. But once you got off that script, and once you were asking Josh to make reads, he thought more blitzes were coming than were really coming. And that is not really something that is a shock at all. That Saleh has had Josh's number for 3 games in a row now. And it's your offense's job to figure out how to work around that. And that's where I think Dorsey has a lot of room to grow, is Dorsey hasn't figured out how to help Josh through that. Now, Josh is always going to be that cavalier, do anything to win quarterback. I think the fumble that he lost is a perfect example of that. Ball hits him right in the face mask. I think, a quarterback who's 6-7 years in the league knows, just fall on it, right? Just fall on the ball. It's first down. You gotta get points in this drive. Nothing good is going to come from Josh scooping up that ball and running into a defensive lineman, right? Because that's where that play is at that point. And awareness needs to be turned up a little bit, right? Because that's Josh's awareness. That's him trying to take over the game. And then you see things like, instead of Josh going out into the sideline, turns back upfield to take contact. And, I understand that Josh is a dog, but I got the feeling like they didn't take the Jets seriously that entire game. Once Rodgers went out, it felt like they were pretty convinced that everything was going to be fine. And just to be fair and honest about the process, this might be as good as the Jets season gets right now. This might be their high point. I think it probably is. You squeaked out a win with a quarterback you have vehemently tried to replace, and you paid $75 million to a quarterback who played 4 offensive plays. And that's why I think it's funny. If you look at our sponsor, that's Mr. Rogers Home, Sean Rogers, huge Bills fan out in Arizona. If you're looking for investment property, you don't have to live in Arizona. Sean can set you up. We've got a lot of keys coming up from Sean, and that's why the tagline says he gets you through the first drive at home, because Aaron Rodgers didn't. He did not get you through that first drive at home. And that's why I made that tagline. But if you're looking for wealth management, real estate management, Sean out in Arizona is the guy you should absolutely call. Now, looking at the game in its entirety, I thought defense played relatively well. I'm still not in love with Terrell Bernard, but I kind of wasn't in love with Terrell Bernard when he was announced the starter as it was. So I'm not going to admit to being objective there. I think that's probably stupid, right? Justin, man, you're killing it with these comments. Straight gunslinger, good or bad? Yeah, Favre would have done the exact same thing. In fact, I remember a play specifically. Favre threw a ball. It was later in his career. Favre threw a ball. He was still in Green Bay. It got tipped at the line. And instead of knocking it down like every other quarterback knows to do, he caught the ball and tried to run with it and got absolutely demolished. A couple games later, same thing happened. Ball came up in the air and he knocked that thing down like Dikembe Mutombo. You're like, no, not in my house. He's like, nope. Straight down to the ground, man. But these are things that you have to learn. And I'd rather you take the lesson week 1, right? Take the lesson week 1. It's fine. You lose to a division opponent. Okay. But Vegas odds went from the Jets winning the Super Bowl 16-1 to 35-1. And that is like in the basement now of those rankings. So you have to really understand that Jets team, this is as good as their season's going to get. And they've got a lot of talent around it. Breece Hall is one hell of a running back. Garrett Wilson is one hell of a receiver. Sauce Gardner is one hell of a corner. They've got a legend at middle linebacker in CJ Mosley. They've got a really solid defensive front that can bring pressure with 4. And listen, they're a good football team. I don't think they're going to score many points now. And as we know, that's how this goes. Now, Buffalo, this is not the end of the world. I would love to tell you that there's more positives to glean out of this game than negative, but let's be real. That's not what happened. There are probably more negatives than positives here, but it's the first week. The Bills have a murderer's row of the first 6 games. You got to get through the first 6 games. The Jets, right, are not going to win many football games this year. And even given their talent and their coaching, they've tried to replace this quarterback once and they're already back to it. So again, don't be too concerned. Alpha Rob asked why they weren't going to Diggs earlier when they were down. I think they went to Diggs on the plays that they had to have. And if you're the Jets, I think it's pretty easy to go, we're just going to bracket Diggs. Like we know it's 3rd and 12. We know you're throwing it to Diggs, right? I think there's times where Buffalo needs to be a little bit less predictable, but you have to have game changers there. Like Gabe Davis was 2 of 4 targets, right? Like Dalton Kincaid was 4 of 4 targets. I think Dawson Knox was 2 of 4, right? So again, you were spreading the ball around, which I think makes your team more dynamic, but it wasn't explosive. I think that's kind of what we were seeing with those interceptions was those were times where Josh was trying to be explosive and take a risk. First interception didn't bother me all that much. You were 3rd and forever at that point. You were probably going to punt as it was. You threw it down to the 4-yard line. Like what? Okay, fine. Second interception was tough. Third interception was tough. And of course the fumble, right? That's all awareness. And I didn't see, because even on the long pass to Gabe Davis, that ball was knifed in there. Josh Allen should never throw that pass again because he and Diggs were right on top of each other along with 4 Jets defenders. That's either a bad route or a bad scheme. You should never run those route. You should never run that route combination, and you should never call that play again if that was by design. No, 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 no. Very, very bad call, right? And on paper, it looks like everything was fine, but that was not. That could have been very, very bad. And Josh was throwing into some really tight windows, and I think he was trying to be explosive. We saw Josh run a lot less than I think we're probably used to, and again, hero Josh has a tendency to want to try and do it all himself. And that fumble, I think, is a perfect example of that. It's just ingrained in him. Ball hits his face mask, drops to the ground. He tries to take it. But this is not something to be alarmed by. It's not. I'd rather this happen week 1 than, week 9, where then you're looking at the rest of your schedule going, man, if we fall apart like this for the next 6 games, we might not even make the playoffs. It happened week 1. It happened against a team that's probably not going to win many football games. It happens every year. I'd rather it happen week 1. But James Cook looked like a very capable receiving back. Looks like we finally got some explosiveness at the wide receiver or at the running back position. Very excited about that. The Bills did spread the ball out. I wish that they had schemed more things deep, but again, Soleil's very good at this. And even if you were watching, like when the All-22 comes out, there were not many deep routes that were available. It's not that Buffalo wasn't running them. The truth of the matter is Soleil had them covered up really, really well. Very, very disciplined defense. So they were doing a very good job there. We saw some screens, which we hadn't really seen very often. Again, when all you have is underneath stuff, screens are not exactly the best thing for you, right? Because they don't open things up as much as they should. Once they can open up the deep game, the screens will be incredibly effective, right? Because you start pushing defenders back a little bit. There's positives here, but don't worry. Everything's going to be okay. I don't think they took the Jets as seriously as they needed to. And I think by the pace of the game, that was pretty obvious. You kick the field goal, like you kick that second field goal, you're like, we'll just kick the field goal here. And then you do questionable things like with 10 seconds left and no timeouts, you try and run a play when you could just kick the field goal to tie. Like, only bad things can happen when you do stuff like that. Because if Josh takes a bad hit, if Josh takes a sack, if the ball, God forbid, is caught in fair territory and not out of bounds, you just lost the game. So there were some maintenance things that concerned me a little bit, which again fall back on McDermott, and McDermott is focused on that defense. Will this team be better for this game? I think they will. I think they will be better for this. Will this eventually all right itself? I think it will. It's going to look a little different than what we're used to. I don't think offensive coordinators can change their stripes this deep. Okay. I think at this point, you've got the offense, you've got the concept, you've got the players, you've got an idea in your head. You now need to just figure out a way to make it work. And unfortunately, the Jets were really good at locking down all the deep routes. The only thing really available was underneath stuff. And Josh would quickly move off of reads and kind of run himself into pressures that weren't really there. The Jets did a very good job of getting to Josh with only 4 guys. They didn't blitz all that much, to be honest with you. And I know you might not think that, but it's true. Josh saw the 10th fewest multi-personnel pressures. So they brought 4 almost the whole game, and it didn't feel like that. It certainly didn't feel like that, but it's very disciplined defense. I'm very excited about Christian Kirksey getting an opportunity with the Bills. I don't know when that will happen. The Terrell Bernard scared me a bit. I know he had 11 tackles. 4 of them were solo, so take that for what it's worth. Not totally in love with that. Really not in love with that. But Josh is on pace to have 63 turnovers this year between interceptions and fumbles. That can't happen again. I went back and looked at his game logs to see how many times did Josh turn the ball over 3 times. How did he respond? Everybody talks about what a dog Josh is, how, he gets over this stuff. He'll come back. And I'm just going to be honest with you. The games after those multi-turnover games, 3 or more, are kind of pedestrian Josh Allen. There's nothing really fancy or special there. It's not like he comes out and throws for 350 and 4 touchdowns. That's not really what happens. It's kind of pedestrian Josh Allen numbers, because I think he says, okay, we gotta pump the brakes. We got to slow down. We got to calm down. We have to take what's there. I will say his rushing attempts have a tendency to go up. So that's definitely the stats say that's going to be what happens, right? Josh is going to be a little bit quicker to get out of that pocket. And I think there was a large contingent this offseason that said, Josh, stay in the pocket. Don't go anywhere. Stay in the pocket. These are players for you, right? These guys are all NFL players. Trust your players. And I think he tried to do that. I don't think he was the best at pre-snap recognition. I think that got him into a couple bad spots. There's definitely players who have been in the league a shorter period of time that pre-snap recognize better than Josh. I'm not saying that Josh isn't bright or quick enough to be an exceptional NFL quarterback. I think he is. But I think the difference is Josh has so many different gears to his transmission that it's easier for him to flip to the I'll just do it myself than let me figure it out. And as he gets older, that gear and that transmission is going to wear out. And I think a lot of us look down the road and say, I'm uncomfortable with Josh running so much because we know what that looks like in 3 years. I think it's part of his development that he has to figure out. I'm going to refer to Josh as an experimental learner. Typically, that's the one that jumps off the top step of the stairs at your house and breaks their ankles. And then they don't jump off the top step anymore. You may say it 1,000 times like, hey, you're going to get hurt. And eventually, a kid's going to jump off the top steps. Josh is an experimental learner. He's going to learn through failure. And we as Bills fans have to accept that. And if this is the failure, you lost on a punt return in overtime against a backup quarterback in week 1, going against a defense that held you to 1 passing touchdown all last season, I'm good with that, right? I'm okay with that lesson. And as Bills fans, again, I think you probably should be too. Paul from #Sports, thanks so much for joining this real quick recap of what we saw. Again, Dalton Kincaid, guys, that position takes forever to mature. Take your time. Don't worry about it. He's going to be a major part of this offense by having 4 targets and 4 receptions in the first game. That already tells you he's a big part of this offense. Don't expect him to go out there and be Kelsey in the second week of his NFL career. You're setting yourself up for failure. Tight ends typically take 2 to 3 years at a minimum to understand that feel in zone coverage and that recognition in man coverage. So please, please, please don't be too concerned about that. Everything's going to be fine. They're going to figure it out. This is nothing to be worried about. Paul from #, thanks to Mr. Rogers Homes for being the only Rogers that gets you through the first drive at home. If you're interested in Arizona real estate, give Sean a call. And thank you so much, guys. Talk to you soon. See you this week.
Hello, fellow Bills fans. Sean Rogers, realtor and lead of the Mr. Rogers Homes team. Did you know that real estate is one of the best ways to build wealth? And right now is one of the best times to own an investment property in Arizona? Please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions so we can take the next step to your financial freedom here in the Valley of the Sun, utilizing real estate. As always, God bless America and go Buffalo!